What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and as per the request of a whole heap of you guys, we are finally going to be doing another map guide today, this time focusing on the attacking side of YAVIN 4. It has been around 6 or so weeks since my last map guide, but with Grievous being released, it has been pretty hard to find the time to make one. With that being said, Geonosis is just around the corner, and I will be doing a map guide for Geonosis pretty much as soon as I can, so hopefully the map guides will come a little faster from here on out. Now, YAVIN does have 4 different phases rather than the normal 3, so we're going to go ahead and get stuck right into it in hopes that the video doesn't go for too long. So as the Empire, you'll be starting off way out at the back of the map, and for the first phase you'll have 3 different objectives to take out, with the goal being to plant a bomb on all 3 turbo lasers. There's one out on the right side of the map, which is probably one of the easy ones to take. Then there's the middle objective, which is by far the hardest to take because, as you can see, it is pretty much just a massive hole in the ground, meaning the enemies can set up pretty well. And then there's also another one pretty much in the same place as the first one, except on the left side of the map instead. So as I said, the middle one is usually the hardest to take, seeing as the enemy team can set up really well and cover it from every side. So because of that, I usually tend to head to one of the side objectives to try and take them earlier on in the game. I usually tend to head for the one on the left, as it seems to be one of the easy ones to take. However, the one on the right is pretty much identical as well, so it really doesn't matter which one you head for first. You can go for the middle objective as well. However, I usually find that early on in the game the enemy team can set up way earlier than the Empire can get there, so I usually try and distract them with the side objectives rather than heading straight for the middle one. For this phase of the map, and pretty much the whole map in general actually, you can do really well with every single class in the game. I usually use either the Assault or Officer classes on this phase. However, if you do get yourself into the right situations, you can dominate with pretty much any class in the game. With both of these side objectives, you never really want to head straight for the turbo laser. Instead, you should try and be a little bit stealthy and try and scope out the area before heading for the objective. If you don't check your surroundings, you'll be killed planting the bomb about 9 times out of 10, but as you can see, by checking the area first and taking care of any rebels, then you can usually plant the bomb and then set yourself up to defend it from your enemies. Now, as for the middle objective, this one needs to be played similar to how I just mentioned for the side objectives. However, you do also sometimes just need to go for it and get that bomb planted, even if it does end in a death straight afterwards. If you are playing as the officer, then there's no better option than the squad shield, and if you can manage to get the shield down in time, it can often make it a whole lot easier for you to plant the bomb. If not though, it is sometimes a good idea to just go for it and hope that you can get the bomb planted, and if you do start to plant it, then there's always a good idea to move around a little bit and try and throw off the enemies that are shooting at you. Now, if you do manage to get it planted but die in the process, it's always good to spawn in as either a hero or a reinforcement to try and make sure the enemy team doesn't cancel the explosive. If you do get it planted and then they manage to cancel it, then it's usually going to be next to impossible to get back in there and plant it again. So once it is planted, you pretty much just need to throw everything you have at it and make sure you do move on to the next phase. Villains like Iden or Bosk are absolutely perfect to try and clear enemies away from the turbo laser, and pretty much you just want to spam explosives near the objective to take out anyone who may be trying to cancel it. Now, if you manage to push through to this second phase of the map, then you'll have another 2 objectives to take out before you can move on to phase 3. Both of these are capture points rather than planting explosives, so these ones are much easier than the ones in the first phase. The one on the right is usually pretty easy to take control of. It is pretty open, but there is some cover throughout the area, so this one should be fairly simple most of the time. As for the one on the left side of the map, this one can be pretty easy too, but it's definitely a bit harder to take than the right side, and if you don't get in there quick enough, it can be a bit of a struggle to take, so you do need to take this one as fast as possible. I recommend going for this left side straight away, as like I said, the enemies can set up pretty fast, but if you can get in there early and get yourself set up, then usually this one is pretty straightforward to take. If you have seen my Death Trooper guide, you may have already seen this footage. I don't usually like using the same footage twice, but this is a pretty decent representation of how you should take this objective. Getting a Death Trooper or a villain like Vader with a bunch of health is going to make this objective a lot easier to take, and if you do make sure to stay on the move and keep trying to cover a few of the different entrances, then you really can take this objective within just a matter of minutes. As I mentioned in the Death Trooper guide, the Sonic Imploder reveals enemies around the grenade, and if you do use it as soon as you possibly can, then you're always going to have a rough idea of where the enemies are coming from, which definitely makes it a lot easier to defend. Now, something that a lot of people do tend to forget with the new spawn system is that your squad mates actually can't spawn on you if you are firing your weapon or getting shot at, so after taking out an enemy or 2, it's always a really good idea to try and find a safe place and then stand still for a couple of seconds before getting back into the fight. By doing this, you're allowing your teammates to spawn on you as often as possible, and then the more teammates that are nearby means the quicker you will take control of the objective. Now, as for the right side objective, seeing as it is a little easier for your teammates to push into the objective, your best bet is actually to try and flank around the back of the area and play a bit more of a slayer role in order to stop the flow of enemies pushing to defend the area. This little spot you can see on screen is usually going to be full of enemies, and if you can get behind them successfully, then you usually can take most, if not all of them out without too much of a fight. Once you do manage to clear a few enemies away, then you should head down to the capture point and try and set up a bit of defense for the enemies once they start to push back in. As I said, this objective is a pretty easy one to take most of the time, so there's not a whole lot I need to say about this one. Just make sure to play it smart and not push too far ahead, and you should be able to take control within a few minutes. Moving on to the third phase now, and this one is probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest phase on the map. For this phase, you'll be overriding the gates to the temple, so you'll need to take the objectives by standing by the controls until the override is complete. The first objective is right next to the Falcon on the little staircase, while the other one is on the walkway right next to the Y-wing. Now for this phase, I generally tend to head for the Falcon objective first, as it seems a little easier to take, and the best place I've actually found to put yourself is just on top of the Falcon itself. If you're still playing as a Death Trooper or a villain, then again you should try and play the Slayer role and defend the incoming enemies. But if you are just a regular trooper, then you should try and get yourself onto the objective and take as much as you can before getting killed. If you have the battle points, I'd recommend either Darth Maul or a Death Trooper for this phase, or you can also do extremely well with the Rocket Trooper as well, so it's really up to you which one you do choose. As for the classes, you can do really well with every single class. Again, you just need to make sure that you're getting yourself into the right spots for each class. For the heavy and officer classes, you should try and keep it a little bit more close quarters, whereas the assault and specialist classes should try to stay mid to long range from the action to ensure you do win the majority of your gunfights. As for the right side objective, this one can be a little tricky, but if you can manage to take it a little slower and take out a few enemies close to the objective, then it can be really easy once you are taking it. There's plenty of cover on the actual catwalk, and if you do have 2 or 3 teammates nearby that are watching your flanks, then usually you can take it fairly easily. If you use the underground tunnels to get closer to the objective, you can usually get there without too much of a fight, and then like I said, once you are on the objective, you'll usually be able to take most, if not all of it in one go. Now, if you do manage to take both of these objectives, then you'll be on to the last phase of the map, and this one is really similar to the third phase. There are 2 more objectives to worry about. There's one on the left, which is probably the harder one to take, as the enemies have so many different entry points. And then if you head all the way over to the right side of the map, there is a second objective, with this one probably being the easier of the 2. Both of these objectives are really hard to break into, however, once you do make it in, then you're usually in a really good spot to take home the win. Now again, I cannot recommend the Death Trooper enough for this last phase of the map. Since this last part is mainly close quarters, their blasters are absolutely dominant, and the Sonic Imploder can genuinely win you the game on its own if you do make sure to use it correctly. I recommend heading for the right objective first, as once you do break into the room, it's almost impossible for the enemies to take back control, and then once you do take this objective out, you have an easy flank on the enemies, which is going to allow your teammates to easily push into the left side objective. As you can see, once you do make it into this room, there's only really one way that the enemies will come from, which is from the catwalk up above, and even then, once they drop down, they're usually easy prey, seeing as you'll already be aiming at them before they really get a chance to see where you are. Now, as for the left side objective, the idea is pretty much the exact same. This room is definitely a little harder to get into, but I suggest heading in from the far left side of the map to avoid most of the enemies who usually will be camping at the top of the staircase. Again, a Death Trooper or someone like Iden or Bosk is definitely your best bet for clearing out the room, and then once you have managed to clear it out, it's usually pretty smooth sailing from there, as long as you can keep an eye on the area above the objective. So that is going to be it for our YAVIN 4 attacking guide, guys. Hopefully some of these tips helped you out, and if they did, then make sure to leave a like down below to help support the channel. Hopefully the defending guide will be up soon after this one, but in the meantime, make sure to check out some of my other map guides for a few more tips and tricks. If you are new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 guides or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.